Yes, welcome into SportsBit Betting Insight today, Thursday, August 11th. Pauly and Teddy. Big game breakdown's going to be the NFL. We'll get to three big games. Deep dive, how to beat the preseason, part one. Looking forward to that as well. No show yesterday, technical difficulties. What are you, on location now?
Yeah, hey man, when my internet access isn't working properly, we gotta go on location. So be it, man. One night should be good tomorrow.
Yes, all right. Fingers crossed on that one. Oh, man. Okay, let's start with what happened. Bad beats and bad bets coming up. Let's start with what happened Tuesday. Troubling news here. Federal appeals court dealt another defeat to New Jersey's year-long attempt to legalize sports betting, setting aside the state's challenge to a federal betting ban. The Third U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals invalidated a law passed by New Jersey in 2014 that would have allowed sports betting at casinos and racetracks. Teddy, this PASPA law is 24 years old.
Yeah, and it's still the law that rules the country. Unfortunately, of course, New Jersey can still appeal the ruling to the Supreme Court, but the Supreme Court has already declined to hear the case once before. At this stage of the game, it looks like Jersey has crapped out in their efforts to get legalized sports betting. And, Pauly, what do you say? That's as disappointing as it gets for us, not just here in Nevada, but throughout the U.S. However, I know there were some that were optimistic. I'm never optimistic when it comes to a more legalized, regulated sports betting. It's one of these things that's moving very, very slowly in terms of cultural awareness. It's going to take some time, and unfortunately, didn't happen here.
And the ruling was 10-2, so it was a blowout.
Well, this is a three-judge ruling.
Oh, okay. I thought it was 10-2. Okay.
No, it was 2-1.
Okay.
And of course there was a dissenter. Judge Julio Fuentes wrote that New Jersey's repeal meant it wasn't actually authorizing sports gambling. Quote, I do not see how a partial repeal of prohibitions is tantamount to authorizing by law a sports wagering scheme in violation of PASPA. But the bottom line is, yes, we're talking about legislation that was passed a long, long, long time ago in a very different era, in a very different environment. But unfortunately, that's the way D.C. works. It's not about what's right. It's not about whether it makes sense. It's about, is there enough money behind this to get it through? And for sports betting, at least so far, it hasn't happened. Nevada remains the only state in the U.S. where you can bet on single events. Delaware has the parlay betting, and they too could potentially somewhere down the line face some type of problems. But Delaware is one of the states that was grandfathered in. 4 states grandfathered in, 46 out. And, well, the 46 states that are out, New Jersey remains in that group.
Bad beats, bad bets, and bad for the books. This was bad for the books. The Giants were bet from plus $1.25 to minus 115, and Crawford does it again for the Giants. They win 1-0.
Yeah, who else? Crawford. He went 9 for 17 in the series, had a 7-hit game the other night, and of course, not all of it was just pro-Giants money. Giancarlo Stanton got scratched, and that was a big part of that line move. But anytime you're talking about a 40-cent move and the books taking the worst of it, if the Giants break out of their funk and win the NL West, this series by Crawford could turn out to be a major turning point, Pauly. And I certainly give San Francisco credit for doing something in Miami, a team they kind of had to beat. They didn't get the bats going just enough to win this one.
Yeah, and they had no business winning that game the other night when Crawford had 7 hits. A bad beat, the under in the Dodger game. Roberts brought Jansen in the ninth, and they were down 3-2, and he gave up 3 runs.
Yeah, whenever you have the under, it's 1-0 in the 7th, you're feeling pretty good. It's 3-2 in the ninth, you're feeling pretty good. Remember, it's not just under 7, under 7.5. So even that 3-2 in the ninth, they come back and win. All right, it's 4-3. We're still going to cash our ticket, even though it's a sweat. And he got the break. Dave Roberts brought in Kenley Jansen despite trailing, because otherwise he would have had at least 4 days off. So underbettors are feeling really good. But you know what happens? It's the worst. The closer comes in a non-closing situation, and guess what? He gets lit. 28 pitches, 3 runs allowed. Josh Raven came in for the last out. Jansen just didn't have it. He got pulled, and Phillies Dodger bettors took the brunt of a pretty bad beat.
Yes, this was a bad bet. Never had a chance. Team USA in the Olympics was the men's basketball opened 37, bet down to 29. They were down 5 at the half, and that was a tight game in the fourth quarter. Carmelo and Kyrie bailed them out. They had all the points, but I think 2 in the fourth quarter as USA hangs on to beat Australia.
Yeah, there was someone at William Hill here in Las Vegas bet $10K to win $100 in the money line. Yeah, that was a sweat. But there are plenty of that. That being said, they won the bet. You know, just because you sweat doesn't make it a bad bet. That being said, when you're betting $10K to win $100 and your life and death in the fourth quarter, yeah, that's not a great wager.
The definition of a bridge jumper there. All right, deep dive, how to beat NFL preseason, part 1 coming up, and the play of the day. But up next, it's here. Big game breakdown. 3 preseason games coming up on SportsBit. Betting Insight today.
Do your research before you bet. Check out our ratings guide to see which books have the best ratings and sign-up bonuses. Open up several accounts and shop for lines at sbrodds.com. Always be ahead of the game.
We're back on Big Game Breakdown. Live odds as always, sportsbookreview.com. Game number 1, Tampa Bay on the road to take on Philly. The Eagles are 3.5 and 37 the total. Football's here, Teddy. Let's start with this. Cluster injuries on the offensive line for the Buccaneers.
Oh, yeah, and it's affected their whole week of offensive preparation. Not what you initially want with a new head coach in Tampa Bay. When you talk about cluster injuries, this is one of the big things I look for in the preseason. It doesn't really matter where those cluster injuries are, but particularly when you've got a number of guys on the offensive line that aren't going to be suiting up, that aren't ready to go, where you have guys who are going to be playing who haven't had a whole lot of practice time with one another. That's problematic. And it doesn't matter what your quarterback rotation is. You know, the Bucs have Jameis Winston, they got Mike Glennon, they got Ryan Griffin. Not maybe an elite QB rotation with Griffin as the third stringer. He's expected to get the lion's share of the snaps. But Winston and Glenn is not a bad one, too. You wouldn't argue with that. That being said, when your QB is going to be running for his life, and when you haven't been able to install a proper game plan because of those cluster injuries in the offensive line, it's something that bettors need to take note of.
Yeah. So Cutter takes over at Tampa. He's in for Lovey. Peterson's in. Chip Kelly's out. What's Peterson saying about his first game here? Does he want to get a W?
You know, and it really seems like he does. And we've seen this line move off of the 3 up to 3.5, in part at least because of the way that Doug Peterson's talking. Doug Peterson's been talking. He's saying how excited he is to win the first game as a head coach, that winning matters to him in the preseason. A lot of the things that rookie QBs say. And of course, Philadelphia has another thing that bettors seem to be very interested in. They've got a quarterback battle. Sam Bradford is expected to be the opening day starter. Don't know if that's necessarily going to be the case. You have Chase Daniel, who is being I believe he's the highest priced backup in the league this year. And of course, you have Carson Wentz, who is expected to get the lion's share of playing time in the second half. He's going to get extended playing time, and the team wants him. No, they need him to look good, considering how much they paid for the guy in terms of future draft stock. So the bettors are definitely liking that Eagles QB depth chart, and they're liking the fact that even though it's a rookie in Wentz getting his first taste of NFL action, there's a vested interest for the coaching staff in putting him in a position to succeed, making him look good.
Yes. Game number 2, Panthers and the Ravens from Baltimore. Baltimore 1.5, 36.5 the total. These are both bet on teams with their quarterback situations.
Yeah, certainly. When we talk about QB rotations, both of these squads have QB rotations that we like. And, of course, with a total of 36.5, if you can find any inkling that the coaches are going to air it out a little bit, it might be something to look at. Let's talk about the Ravens. Everyone knows Joe Flacco. Don't know if Flacco's going to go. It's going to be Ryan Mallett and Josh Johnson. Flacco's are looking at him to come back by the end of the preseason. But Mallett, someone who's had significant previous experience. He's a veteran. Josh Johnson is a mobile quarterback, and Jared Johnson should play here as well. He's got a fascinating story. Came out of A&M 5 years ago. He's been in 5 training camps over the last 5 years. He's been cut at the end of every training camp every season. But another guy who has the potential to create with his legs as much as his arm. And Carolina's a similar story when you look at the quarterback situations. You've got Cam Newton, obviously. You have Derek Anderson, the veteran for Carolina. You love a guy like him coming in and with the potential to carve up a second or third string defense. And you have Joe Webb, a guy who's made me a ton of money in the preseason over the years. Again, the guys who are coming in with the fourth string receivers and the third string offensive line, and the continuity isn't there on offense. You love a quarterback who can create with his feet. Joe Webb's been able to do that throughout the course of his preseason career.
So we're going to talk about this in deep dive, but you have to know your coaches here. And John Harbaugh is 7-1 in preseason openers, and he was not happy with the 1-3 straight up last year.
No, and Baltimore throughout the Harbaugh era has been a bet on team in August, particularly in this role as home favorites. They've been very, very good. They went 4-0 straight up and against the spread the previous year in 2014, but last year 1-3 in August, and the only win came in the opener, where they won by 3 in a game where they were laying 2.5. They covered by a hook. But Harbaugh talked about how that 1-3 preseason kind of set the tone for an 0-3 start to the regular season, which set the tone for what was a pretty bad campaign for Baltimore. So there is a vested interest for the Ravens in winning this preseason opener. That being said, for Ron Rivera, who's also been a pretty good preseason coach, certainly was last year, Carolina, not a team I'm in any rush to bet against in August, given their QB rotation and their propensity for winning these type of games in recent year, and their strong depth. One of the big things that carried them all the way to the Super Bowl.
One more, live odds, sportsbookreview.com. The Saints on the road to take on the Patriots. New England 3, 39.5 the total. Here's the big news. Boston Herald reporting Garoppolo starts and Brady will not play.
Yes. That being said, with New England, there's a lot of rumor. There's a lot of conjecture because Belichick does not talk about what he wants to do. The one thing that Belichick did say is that he wants to make sure that his game plan is in place. And he said this earlier in the week because these two teams have been doing joint practices against one another. And it's been physical and it's been nasty, and there have been those like little brawls that you always hear about in training camp. When you have teams that are working together in these joint practices and then they play one another, sometimes the hardest hitting comes in the practices, not in the games. And for Belichick, I want to read this quote. This is from last weekend. Quote, "We still have things we need to install. We still have a lot of situation work we need to cover. I know we'll be doing some of those things against New Orleans, so it'll be good to have already put it in, to have run it and then run it against them rather than go out there and have that be the first time. A lot of times there is some ironing out to do. We will try to get some of that out of the way the first time or two and then try to run it competitively." When you read between the lines there, and this is so much of preseason is deciphering coach speak. We'll talk a little bit about this in deep dive as well. But when I read between the lines there, I'm seeing Belichick saying, hey, this game matters. There's stuff we want to accomplish very real in terms of game plan and situational work. And the fact that we've been able to practice against New Orleans and then are going to run it against New Orleans is a good thing, not a bad thing. So
from the Tuesday session, Brady was 7 of 11.
Tom Brady's not going to go.
Huh?
I said, even though Brady's not going to go, I'm not convinced the Patriots are going to mail this in.
Yeah, sorry. But from the Tuesday session, Brady was 7 of 11 with an interception, 11 on 11. And Garoppolo was 7 of 15 with an interception. Brees was 21 of 25, and McCown was 3 of 6 with a pick. What do you do with those numbers?
Well, you don't make any. I pay zero attention to how many completions and a quarterback got in a training camp session, because what kind of routes were guys running? Were his receivers open, or was he trying to fit things in a tight coverage? I mean, it's pretty meaningless. But all the focus here is on New England. Oh, Brady's not going to play. Brady's not going to play. Well, guess what? Garoppolo has something to prove. And the Saints, Brees put up these huge numbers. I'm not convinced Brees is going to play at all in this game. We haven't heard that he is specifically. And if he plays, maybe a series, maybe 2. Luke McCown, not likely to play much. The Saints know what they have as a starter and as the backup. Who's going to get the lion's share of playing time here is going to be Garrett Grayson. He's in his second year out of Colorado State. He basically had he had no playing time whatsoever last year. And Grayson's the guy who is going to have to cover the point spread for you if you're betting on the Saints. And the markets have been all over New England in this game. Opened 4, now down to 3. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see 2.5s or 2s before kickoff, Paul. That being said, the Saints have been bet on in week 1 in the preseason. 4-1 their last 5 straight up and against the spread. That being said, last year under Peyton, they went 0-4 straight up and against the spread in August. And of course, that was the one loss after those 4 consecutive week 1, or opening week, I should say, preseason wins and covers for New Orleans.
As always, live on sportsbookreview.com. Football's finally here. More preseason coming up on tomorrow's show. Up next, deep dive, how to beat preseason, part 1 coming up, and the play of the day on SportsBit. Betting insight today on SBRpicks.com.
Hey, SportsBit viewers, you might want to tune into the MLB odds couples over Thursday, August. I don't know, maybe not, but I think Mike Brenner and I are both coming off another big profitable day each. Both of us. That makes, 2 or 3 days in a row. Each of us, something like that.
It's not a big surprise.
I don't know what's going on, but I really would advise you to tune into today's show on MLB odds couples.
Absolutely, and when say hello to Teddy and Pauly for us also. There's some good fellas right there.
All right, back on SportsBit Betting Insight today. Pauly and Teddy, time for the deep dive. How to beat the preseason 101. Part 1 today, part 2 Friday, with info you're not going to find anywhere else. These are the basics, what the markets are reacting to and what you should be reacting to as well. When you talk to people outside of Nevada and you tell them you bet the preseason, they think you're nuts, Teddy.
And it's baffling to me. What's the difference between a preseason bet and a regular season bet? When you have an edge, you bet. When you don't have an edge, you pass. When you think you have an edge, you bet. When you don't think you have an edge, you pass. It doesn't change whether it's preseason NFL, whether it's regular season NFL, whether it's the playoff is in the NBA. It makes no difference. You bet when you have an edge. Let's start with that as a concept. And people say, oh, well, I don't want so-and-so on the field in the fourth quarter costing me bets. Guess what? Some random play happens every week in the NFL that's going to cost you a bet or win you a bet. The bad beats aren't unique to August football. So when people say, why are you betting preseason? What's the deal with preseason? You must be a degenerate when you're betting preseason. No, there are edges in the preseason, and that's exactly what this deep dive is for. Now, the deep dive today, these are the basics. What the markets, as you mentioned, what the markets are reacting to and what bettors should be reacting to. This is kind of a handicapping August football 101. Tomorrow, I'm going to give you the crazy stuff, the stuff that's going to make you money. But for today, let's talk about what the markets are looking at and what you should be looking at, especially if you're a newbie when it comes to betting preseason football.
Number 1, don't confuse teams' regular season capabilities with their preseason goals.
Yeah, I mean, it's real simple. Let's just take one game this week, for example. How about the Packers and the Browns? Okay, Packers are really good. Browns are really bad. We know that. That's September. In August, it's a field goal game, maybe. Green Bay, very little to prove in the month of August. No real quarterback battles in the month of August. Not many positional battles in the month of August. Cleveland, they got QBs battling for spots. They got a bunch of roster spots open. Everybody's battling for a starting job. There's a lot more for Cleveland to prove in August than Green Bay, and that's just one example. So don't ever think that just because someone's going to be good next month, that they're going to be good this month, or vice versa.
Number 2, do your homework. Find accurate local news sources.
Yeah. I mean, you're going to find so much bad information about who's going to play in the preseason. And the mainstream media is always interested in the fantasy guys. What starting wide receiver is going to sit out today when he was only going to play 2 series anyway and be out of the field, off the field by the second quarter? Remember, the majority of point spread outcomes are decided after halftime. So if you want to win in August, you got to find out who's going to be in the game during this crucial time. You want teams that have second stringers or third stringers getting as much second half playing time as possible. Those tend to be bet on squads. When you have the guys that aren't going to make the roster fighting for a little bit of playing time in the second half, that's not nearly as much of a bet on situation.
Number 3, know your quarterback rotations.
Yeah, and it's something we talked about in all of the big game breakdowns earlier on today's show. Look, you want quarterbacks that can play at the NFL level. I love quality third stringers with NFL starting experience. They're plentiful around the league. I love mobile third string quarterbacks. I hate statues because third string offensive lines don't tend to be particularly effective. But again, you want to know who's going to be on the field in the second half of these games. And look at the picture. Derek Anderson and Joe Webb are going to play after Cam Newton for the underdog Panthers in Baltimore tonight. 2 examples of guys who tend to be bet on QBs in the month of August.
Yes. Number 4, very important. Know your coaches. Who wants to win? Who doesn't care?
Yeah, sure. And again, this can change over time. But the guys that I'm going to mention here, they've got track records already. Look, Mike Zimmer, he's got a track record. He wants to win games in August. The Vikings have been bet on all the way in Mike Zimmer's 2 years as a head coach. Mike Tomlin cares about winning in August. You have a game in the fourth quarter, Tomlin's going to pull out the stops. Doesn't matter if his 8th string quarterback's in there. He's going to try to find a way to win it. Then you get a coach like Jason Garrett, let's say, for Dallas, and he could give 2 shits if the Cowboys win or lose. He's secure in his job. He could care less about he's much more worried about injuries, especially given Dallas's recent history with injuries. Garrett doesn't care one iota about winning in August. Doesn't mean you bet against him every game, but it means that you look for spots to be betting on the bet on guys and against the bet against guys.
Last one, bet facts, not opinions.
Yeah, and this is as simple as it gets. In the regular season, I'm going to bet on games where I feel the betting markets are giving one team too much credit or another team not enough credit. Those are my opinions, and opinions that I feel are strong enough to risk my money to bet on. In the preseason, I don't want opinions. I want information. Information and information only. In most cases, the coaches themselves are nice enough to tell me exactly what they intend to do. And a coach, let's say, who wants to evaluate his depth in any particular ball game is generally not a coach that I want to wager on. I'm looking for facts, not opinions, when I'm making August wagers.
Yes, very good. Tomorrow, part 2, more hardcore. Great numbers and footballs here. Let's get those views up, and up. And we'll do more football on the weekend preview edition. Tough one with the Tigers last night. They only scored 1 run against King Felix. So money time, play of the day. Betting number 260. The Patriots lane 3. They have work to do. We love the combination of Gronk and Bennett at tight end. Could be the best combo in NFL history. Plus, Belichick needs to get Garoppolo playing time as he starts the first 4 games. So get them ready. Game conditions at home. New England, -3. The play of the day. We're back Friday. NFL, bad beats, bad bets, plenty of Major League Baseball, and deep dive part 2, how to beat the preseason on SportsBit. Betting Insight today on SBRPicks.com.